Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Columbus, Georgia, and it is time for the Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. We are closing out our September series. We've had some excellent podcast guests this month. We've been talking about domestic violence. We've been talking about violence and what kind of resources that you have if you are a victim of violence. We also have been talking or will be talking about a relationship dynamic because I know that is you all's favorite conversation topic for me. So I will not disappoint you today when we talk about when the divorce dust settles, co-parenting, dating, and marriage. So we're here in Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and we do know that there are a lot of factors that can contribute to people feeling hopeless. So we want to make sure that we're sharing information for somebody who may have a story and feel like that you're alone, that there are some resources and some people that are going through and have come through things. And so be encouraged. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Reverend Adrian M. Baker. Adrian Baker is the assistant pastor of Christ Way Baptist Church in the historic Smoketown neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Reverend Baker obtained his Master of Divinity degree with honors from Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. He is a gifted preacher of the gospel, an esteemed and sought after theologian, a talented musician, a risk management professional, and an activist fighting for liberation for all. His mantra is for the cross, for the cause, for the cross, for the cause, and espouses a refreshingly unique perspective. He is the proud husband to Latrice and father to Matthew and Ellington. Baker has also earned several designations, commendations, and honorary proclamations, and is a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome to the show, Reverend Baker.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver. I just have to express my gratitude for being here today, even in my reluctance. But we are going to have this conversation. I'm not going to tell nobody where the bodies are buried. I'm not so if y'all looking for a little bit more tea, I'm trying to stay saved and I'm trying to stay alive, so I'm not gonna tell it all.
It's not that kind of tea, Reverend Baker. It's more transformation tea, as opposed to the gossip
kind of
tea.
I got it.
I
understand. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you so much. I told Reverend Baker before we got on here that I have 5 million questions, so we're going to go ahead and get into this thing. And Reverend Baker is not speaking for every brother out there, sisters. He is just speaking from his experience, and we are literally going to have a conversation.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I know when we are in our 20s, when we are in our teens, when we are early in this dating game, early in this marriage experience, we just have expectations that, you know, as we grow and learn and develop, realize may not be realistic or may not have been based on healthy things, and we're trying to figure out over time what's more accurate. So when you think about some of your early expectations in dating and in your first marriage, how have they evolved?
Okay, so on the surface level, it was really I was focused on like a hyper religiosity, you know, a woman that was maybe a virgin or close to it, or, you know, that type of stuff. And it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model now. But it's so then you're like, oh yeah, I want to make sure that she's this and she's that. And as far as the biblical model that is portrayed back in BC before Christ was even around. So in that, it's just those expectations on the surface level you have to, but on the more below the surface, on the deeper level, it was my expectations about like family dynamics and things like that, on how much that plays into and how it's lived out. Those expectations of how someone embraces, is it I dealt with a either or type of situation. Either it's
Mm,
me and my,
mhm.
and then not, but I'm like both, it's both and let's
Yeah,
have
come on,
both.
get rid of that black and white thinking. Mhm,
Yeah, the black and white
mhm.
thinking. And so those expectations, just being able to understand that not everyone feels the same way I feel about family, thinks the same way I think
Mhm.
about family. Having to actually have that conversation, it's important before you dive deeper. So a lot of the questions that I may have that I never did propose, that I
Mhm.
never did lift up
Mhm.
when I was younger, because I just didn't know how to go deeper and what that really
Yeah.
would play out into the rest of my life.
You know, you spoke a whole word there because I think, of course, what are our early influences in relationships? We have the biblical influence. We grew up in the church. Now, interestingly, we tend to have that probably in a more narrow way toward women, the virtuous
Mm,
woman, the virgin, the all of these things. We're scrutinizing women very heavily
absolutely.
from a biblical perspective, sometimes much more than we are doing men. But then on the other side of that, we're not at all talking about, hey, what's your family mental health history? How you
Right.
manage finances? How do you problem solve? What happens when you get angry?
And
Um,
those are so essential. Those questions are so essential. And now I do have to put a disclaimer as well. Uh, all these expectations I had placed on her, I was out here doing everything I wanted to do. You understand?
Come
So
on, honesty.
flawed. It was flawed and everything like that. So it's not equitable. Let me say it like that.
Yeah,
This is not
yeah.
fair and it's not equitable. And so as we learn, as we learn ourselves, that the
Mhm.
same whatever you want someone to do towards you, you got to be able to uh, be willing to do for them as well.
What do you think influenced that? Like as a man, I can have kind of a different standard. I know that we often the expectations we have for women, they are, typically based some on theology. It's a distorted one. But as a man, what were your influences in terms of dating and being in relationships? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so dating, I'm going back to my grandmama and my granddaddy, seeing them the way their model was. He was the big preacher, and she was at home. Now she was able to turn the head the way in which she was able to turn the head, yet and still it was the big strong man, and then it was the matronly woman that was, and so that influenced and shaped it. But then once I had my daughter, I had a
Mm,
daughter, and I was like, the same thing that I want for me, I want for her, and
mm,
that I want for my son, I want for her.
mhm.
So once I that all of that,
All of that changed.
all of that changed,
Mhm.
and my theology started changing.
Yeah.
Everything started changing. My relationship to Christ, everything, in making sure that everything was just, everything was equitable, and then the way in which I now read even scripture through that
Mm,
lens, um,
mm.
it's different. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't understand how people can be so dogmatic about things, especially when they have a daughter or a woman that they love.
Well, their daughters are out here changing lives. However,
Changing lives.
you do have to be in a place to receive
Mhm.
that change, right? So you mentioned sustainability. You got a whole amen out here about like what is actually sustainable. So, I'm having expectations that are unrealistic. I haven't addressed the things that actually allow a marriage to flourish because we haven't talked about how we parent. We haven't talked about how we address conflict. We haven't worked on our
No,
communication. We haven't addressed some of these unhealthy patterns that we grew up seeing that we are going to be modeling when we get into situations that are very similar. And so you mentioned that your daughter kind of shifted your theology a little bit, but I know it must be very difficult to realize that we're now on a different page than when we first got together. So what were some of
yeah.
the ways you tried to navigate that?
So yeah, that was difficult as well. In my first marriage, um, I tried to hold on for dear life
Mm,
longer than I should have. because of really this biblical expectations of you stay with and you know, this thing is to death, and not that that model is still not to be lifted. Yet in my situation, it wasn't feasible. It was toxic. It wasn't, you know, and I'm taking accountability on my side. I don't want to villainize anyone else, but I'm saying we shouldn't have been together past a point. It wasn't healthy for anyone in our household. And I stayed a little bit too long because I was trying to hold on to this concept of the biblical family, that we stay no matter what through and I'm not going to argue scripture on this. It's just that I was released from that. And once I was released from it, I felt free. And God said, I'm still with you, Adrian. I'm still with you. You're still mine. And that grace that we have to have for each other, and the grace for the other person, and the grace just for everyone else that you encounter through humanity. It's for every relationship that you have. And
I like
especially
that.
relationship with yourself.
I like that grace and humanity, recognizing it took both of us to get here. So I'm not going to villainize you in recognizing that this marriage is healthier for it to end. And, you know, prayerfully, you won't villainize me, and we'll be able to just recognize that there were probably some signs early on, because I realized that not everybody gets marriage counseling before they get married. Now, sometimes we'll get some pastoral counseling, but, you know, we don't really, like you said, go into the depths of a lot of these. Family of origin matters.
Yes.
What we learned, what we saw, what we did, what was modeled, all of these things matter as I'm learning how to be a person in a union.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of times, you know, like you said, we marry based on these expectations that aren't sustainable, and we don't actually know the tools.
Right.
Because sometimes if we went to marriage counseling, we probably would not get married.
Right.
It's harder to get out of a marriage once you're in it. Like you said, I want to fight for it. I don't want to. I stood before God and I said I was till death do us part. So it's harder once I'm in it. But if I realize, like, we may not be able to sustain this before we get to the altar.
Yeah. And it ends up being like the tug that is going, those two perspectives, you want them to come closer together, but they end up tugging further apart. And what was in those were things that were unsaid and unasked. So it was the unknown. And so we deal with these issues that are as we go, that develop as we go. And we're just doing this on the job training type stuff. And he, like, when we're presented with that, a lot of times the pressures of life, the events of life that happen, death, and all of those things that may happen within the life cycle of a marriage. It can create a major wedge between. And then how do you, when people play out what they expect to happen, how to reconcile those two is very different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because as you said, it's not just this marriage. Like, we have to deal with finances. We have children. And these are the major reasons why people divorce, right? Children, finances, unhealthy communication patterns, inability to be able to problem solve effectively, triggering each other. We know that sometimes we just trauma bonding with folks. We get together because you hurt and I'm hurt. And we over here thinking we gonna be able to heal each other's hurt, and we over here triggering each other's hurt.
We got one thing in common: that trauma. And let's
trauma brought us here.
Life
Absolutely,
based on that.
Absolutely. But is that sustainable, right? Like, as you said, I don't even have the tools I need for this journey.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what they were.
And that's what I've had to wrestle with, and still wrestling with, developing the correct tools for every relationship that I deal with. That's whether it be the relationship with my children, the relationship with my wife, the relationship with my family, the relationship with my brother, the relationship with my sister and my sibling, all that out here. So it's hard. It's
Oh
hard.
yeah, absolutely. Right. Because like you said, this on the job training. Like I'm supposed to have a mask on right now. I don't have a mask. I'm getting okay. Eyes blurry, stuff getting in, right? Like, oh, I need a blowtorch. I got a hammer. What
I I understand. Yeah.
right,
So
like, yeah, so but I also realize, within that struggle of I don't want this to end and I'm trying to hold on to it a lot longer. That is a common thing for
mhm,
people, like, to really wrestle with this
yes.
notion of a marriage dissolving.
Yeah.
The guilt, the disappointment, the shame, the
Yeah. That
confusion, the anger, the betrayal, any
I don't like to fail at anything. I mean, at anything. Like,
mm,
I got a real bad. Everybody knows we can play spades, and I'm a flip over the table if I lose. You understand what I'm saying? So I got issues with
mm,
losing, and to really equating that loss, that relationship, how big and how you've chosen this person for the rest of your life, and then that doesn't work out. That reality doesn't happen, and how big of a failure it feels to some. And then because of that failure, you live it alone. You just live that alone, and so
mm,
that is it's a major thing to grapple with and
yeah,
try to pull yourself out of. Uh,
yeah,
and having grace for yourself. Again, I keep
mm,
saying that
mm-hmm,
grace for yourself um, through everything. I
mm-hmm,
found that no one can love me if I don't love myself. No one can
yes,
forgive me if I don't forgive
mm,
myself.
mm-hmm,
No one. So all in all, um, that self love, that self care, that self um, you got to speak to yourself sometime and encourage yourself.
mm,
All of that
yeah.
to we have to lift up before we can engage with the rest of the world.
I think that grace is somebody's word that they need to hear. And I imagine that's why it keeps showing up in your spirit because
Yeah,
somebody is suffering in silence.
yeah.
Somebody is struggling in a marriage or struggling with a divorce. All of these feelings that you talked about, that they're dealing the shame and the guilt, and
Yeah,
what could I have done? Did I do everything that I could have done?
yeah,
Did I give up too soon? All of these things that we wrestle with. Am I enough? What's going to happen after this? How do I function?
mm,
And now I got a divorce on my, because we wear divorce sometimes like a scarlet letter.
yeah,
And the shame of it hangs on us
yeah,
because it feels like failure.
yeah. And it's a grave that keeps uncovering like every day. Like in the midst of
Mm,
that, like it's a we talk about the divorce dust settling, but that dust really never kind of settles,
mm,
especially when there's kids involved, the co-parenting issue.
mm,
But it's as if like you're really at Groundhog Day, like
mm,
this day stop. Will the
mm,
manifestations or the presentations of the grief of this
mm,
loss, how ambiguous it may be, all of it, we can do everything in our day, um, do all the activities of daily living that
mm.
we would do, and still at the end of the day, you're coming back to that grave. You're coming back to
Yeah.
that grief. You're coming back to and how to pull yourself out. And it's hard. And it wasn't until I talked to another man that had dealt with that. Um,
Mm,
that it dealt with it, because again we suffer, especially for me, and I'm going to speak for me, that I did this thing alone. I thought that I was the only one that ever dealt with
mm,
a situation like that, and dude was like, hey man, hey, pull yourself, hey, get yourself together, hey, I've been through this, it's going to get better.
mm,
It feels totally like kraut right now, but
mm,
just feel just keep on going, just keep on going.
mm, mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's the hope that you're talking about. Like, it's funny that you mentioned the grave because I give that example a lot with people,
Mm.
but I don't use it in that way. I say, it's buried, stop digging it back up.
And that's exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you've already put that in the ground and said your words and been able to grieve and release, like why you keep digging it back up, opening that wound up over and
Mhm.
over again, because it's not helpful, right? Like sometimes it's that we have to look at the things that we're doing and decide, is this helpful to me?
Yes.
And that's not helpful. But the reason that I'm continuing to be back at the grave is because I never allowed myself to grieve and heal. I didn't
Yeah.
give myself permission to heal because I hadn't released it. And yes, thank you for speaking on that. We had a brother on here a few weeks ago that was talking about losing his child, and the pain of that. He said it would have destroyed him had he not finally released it and talked to somebody about it. But he carried that pain for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
The guilt and could I have done something different, and all of these, and my wife and I are grieving in different ways, and so I can't really talk to her about. I don't feel like I can talk to her about it, because I feel like we're just miles apart from each other, so I feel so isolated. And if I had not found someone who loved me enough to be like, hey,
Yeah.
first of all, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Second of all, yeah, it hurts. Like, let's just honor that
Let's honor
that is painful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, let's also think about there is hope on the other side of that. There's healing on the other side of that hurt, but I got to go through that process first.
And that's it's more like a virus that it has to kind of run its course.
Yeah.
Because when we say, you know, we got to leave it there, we take the burden to the Lord and leave it there, or you got to bury that thing in the grave. It all sounds so simple. Yet and still the heart, the way it tugs, the way the guilt tugs on you, the way everything, the remorse, all of those things, how it tugs on you, the anger when it comes in, all of those cycles of grief, when they are presented, they present it in a different form every single time. And it all, like, I thought I buried this thing, but this thing, this monster is up under the bed and it is still here.
Yeah. Well, you didn't bury it, you internalized it.
And a lot of men internalize it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in this conversation, I hope that some men are like, hey, been there,
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
But
burial is a whole process. You get,
yeah,
you know, you get to say goodbye for one last time. You get to be in that space. You get to sit. You get to just whatever you need to let go of and release. You get to do, but when you're holding that thing in, you don't ever bury it. Like it's just in the closet.
Yeah, and divorce is really burial without closure sometimes. And so that is,
Come
you
on,
know,
word.
a lot of times it's final with death, the physical death. But that divorce, that's a spiritual kind of thing that you're dealing with. It's a and so a lot of times you don't have that closure that comes with that. And so when you're still looking for closure, you're still looking, is this thing dead? Is this thing still dead? And it's like, this thing is not dead, it'll never die. And so this thing will never die. And so when you
keep coming back.
it just keeps coming back. And then you have to temper yourself. And then we're like, okay, this thing is never going to, the dust is never going to all the way settle. Even if it looks like it is, there's still room for some manifestation, some presentation to come back, in having to then be like, okay, I got to know myself. I got to know what my triggers are. I got to figure this thing out for me, what my new normal looks like, all these things.
Now that's a real conversation right there. Yeah. Like there is going to be residual. But if we think about when we bury people in real life, their memory doesn't die.
No.
You know, the experiences we've had with them don't die. And we talk about complicated grief. So there was some strain, some stress in that relationship when this person died. And so a divorce sounds to me like very similar to complicated grief. So it's dead, but I'm still dealing with the aftermath, because all of the things that led to the divorce, and then, you know, the co-parenting piece. So if we have a child, I'm still connected to you by virtue of this little human we created.
Absolutely.
So that stuff that didn't get resolved, as you said, we didn't get closure with, that's going to show up in our co-parent.
And that's the thing as well. So when I say that divorce doesn't settle, that co-parenting piece is really a place in which it is an active and dynamic situation. It's ever changing, and you really have to temper yourself in the relationship, because it's still a relationship. A co-parenting relationship is still some form of relationship, and you have to say, okay, no matter what the other party does, how they have approached this situation,
Mhm.
I'm going to approach it this way. And I'm not going to say that it's helped me,
Mhm.
but it has freed me. You know, a lot of times folks will say, you're too nice, or this, you know, you let this slide, or you let that slide, or I, I can't just go and be, you know, in the
Savage.
midst. I don't have it in me to be like
Mhm.
that. I can't go to sleep at night, knowing that I've, you know, been that way. So I always now temper myself. Now, Adrian, what would Adrian do? Not
Mhm.
what the other party would do.
Mhm.
Not let that affect me. So I set the temperature in my behavior, and not let someone have the power to set the temperature in this relationship, um, when it's for the best interest
Of
of
the
the kid.
child, right? Yeah, because that's I mean, and I think that is the challenge for us when we're still grieving, when we're still hurting, like you said, all of these stages of grief. Sometimes because of that, we can utilize a child
Yeah.
in a way that they become a tool of manipulation or expression of
Yes.
that pain, right? So particularly when we start, co-parents start dating again,
Mhm.
or co-parents are moving on and a person is grieving in their own ways, so I may not want to see you, but we still have this child together.
Yeah.
So we got to navigate, making sure this child gets the chance to spend time with both of their parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
what are some
feel,
of the go ahead.
but I feel like if um, as long as the kids are good, hey,
Mhm.
live your life. I want you to be happy. If you happy, it's probably gonna be better for our co-parent relationship because somebody's making you happy.
Mhm.
You got, I mean, you have a less to trip on. So it means something for me. I'm like, move on.
Mhm.
You know, be happy. That as long as he or she or whatever is good around my
Mhm.
kids,
Mhm.
uh that's all I want.
Mhm.
Live your life.
Mhm.
Because it'll, I feel it'll be better for co-parent relationships when everyone is fulfilled
Mhm.
um in their marriage relationships or whatever their
Yeah,
uh
there. Yeah, I think that when we get to a healthier place, that's easier for us to be able to say. But when we still in that place of
yeah,
resentment or
yeah.
um, maybe we're, disappointment, sadness, embarrassment, shame, sometimes it is very hard for people
Mhm.
to actually be able to recognize that this relationship between us has ended. But because of the love we share, because I'm still gonna love you. Uh,
Yes.
you were a part of my life.
Mhm.
We right. So I'm still gonna love you. We have this, but I know that for some people, the bitterness and the resentment
Mhm.
are barriers to them
Yeah.
being able to express that in a healthy way. So it comes out in more of a controlling way.
Yeah. And again, for the man, it's never going to be equitable in the co-parenting situation.
Mm.
It's
Speak more on that.
okay. So um how can I not say where the berries about the bodies are buried? Uh, no.
Choose your words carefully. Choose your words
Choose
carefully.
my words carefully. Okay, so I got to give the Olivia Pope response. Okay.
Absolutely.
So in situations where there is a domestic conflict, the custody
Mm,
conflict, things like
yeah.
that,
Yeah.
once it gets to the court system, depending on where you are, no matter how good you are as a
Mhm,
man, now
mhm,
you really have to deal um, with that siding, that bias that already that the mother
mhm,
has,
mhm,
you know, that the courts may have for the mother, or just the
mhm,
system may
mhm,
have. I've spent a lot of money, I mean a
mhm,
ton of money,
mhm,
um, trying to get things done. And for a while I didn't see my children for
mhm,
a long time,
mhm,
waiting on the court system to do right and do that.
mhm, mhm,
Then you it's hard. And so I just want to set somebody free that might be like, man, this is not fair. We have to kind of accept until things change, that it's never going to be equitable for us. Yet and still, the kids will always know the level in which you fought for them, and you're still fighting just to be in their life. My son, he said it one day, like it was just normalized. He's like, "Hey, Dad, man, thank you for always, fighting for us, man, and just always being there." And he just might have just meant it like, "Oh, sounds like a good thing to say," but that set me free. Like I was
like you saw me.
yeah, you saw me. I've been fighting the whole time, just every time, and it's just not knocking the other person. I'm just saying how the system is just not set up for the man to win all the time in this, and we have to say what is good for me to still remain and stay in their lives. And so some things I have to give up, some things I can't have all my way. That power of negotiation, mediation, things like that, like mediate it out until you, if you ain't seen them in a long time, hey, whatever, I just want to see my kids, whatever it is, so it's that co-parenting piece when it gets to that ugliness, like that custody battles and things like that. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, we are under no illusion that there isn't bias in the court system. Like we absolutely know that there is bias. We know that there typically is favor toward the mother, because there still is a perception that the mom is the best one to raise the children. We still believe that this perspective that the mother is more nurturing and maternal when they're younger. They need to be with the mom. Like we actively, that same bias that we talked about in terms of the virtuous woman is the same bias we have in terms of parenting. And you are absolutely speaking for a lot of brothers who have gotten disheartened in this process, who have gotten frustrated, who have been hurt, who have been through a lot of financial struggles, going back and forth in the court system, to simply be able to have the time given to them to spend with their children. And so I want to honor that is a lot of men's experience. When we're not able, and this goes back to us not addressing how we deal with conflict and not how we deal with disappointment and hurt and pain, and how sometimes kids can end up being tools of manipulations in situations, and it is detrimental to everybody to be having that type of animosity. Like that is ideally we would want to, as co-parents, be able to like, hey, let's just work this out. You get them here, I'll get them here. We split up the holidays. We do this. Like in an ideal world, we'll be able to do that. But the reality is everybody doesn't have that situation.
Yeah, it doesn't happen all that. But I do want to encourage some man, hey, don't give up. Just keep on, keep at it. Do whatever you can do just to be in their lives and to do what you can to kind of rear them and raise them the best way that you can in this new normal situation.
I heard you say, don't give up, brothers.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. If this is your situation, don't give up, because that child is going to at some point recognize everything that you did.
And that child
to try to make and that child needs you. We are very clear about the importance of having men in our children's lives. Their fathers in their lives. Let me not even say men, their fathers, the importance of our children having their fathers in their lives. And so I'm hearing you say, for you tried to negotiate in a way of, okay, what is the path of least resistance sometimes? What is, if I need to be able to just not say that, not respond to that, not react to that, not do that, that is going to allow me to be able to see my children, then that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for them.
Absolutely. That's and a lot of times it feels like, oh, he's punking. I ain't got time to be to deal with the fallout inside my own body, like that stress that will manifest inside my own for trying to meet somebody with that kind of conflict.
And that's not a discussion that you you really need to be having with folks that's not in your situation anyway. Like, y'all don't have to deal with any of consequence. It's easy to say to someone, oh, well, you need to handle it this way. You need to let this person know that you're in. Again, is that helpful or not helpful? The combativeness that we can get into only makes this worse sometimes. Sometimes I may be thinking something that I choose not to say.
Yeah. So that filter, you have to have
Yes,
an automatic new filter.
that
Once that
grace.
sets in, you better
Right.
put that on now.
Okay,
That
come on,
new
harness
filter.
my tongue, God.
Yeah,
Harness
harness your tongue.
my tongue. Don't you say that. That's not
Right.
going to
So a lot of
work out.
thinking before we speak.
Mhm.
So it's those things are essential
Yeah,
to
that's
navigate
growth.
new
That's
growth.
growth, not to fight every battle. Because
Not
yeah. Oh no, I'm right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
realize it's not a war anymore. It's
Right,
really
right.
um the main goal is for these kids,
Hmm.
for them to be whole, for
Yeah,
them to be well,
yeah.
for them to have both of us, for them to feel that they are wanted, to feel that
Hmm.
they are needed, that they are
Hmm.
valued. That's the main thing. And
Yeah.
so it's not war like that either, or it's both
Mm.
and.
Yeah.
They can it's both and.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
thinking philosophy is essential. That
Absolutely.
it's worked.
Absolutely.
And not to say that my situation has worked out, but hey, but what has worked for my mental, what has worked
Yeah.
for my
Yeah.
soul, worked for me, um, that has been that's just been my method, my
That's been
mode is
part of the
okay.
journey. Absolutely. Been part of your
Part of
journey.
it. Mhm.
Now, when you come out of a situation like this, I
Ah.
imagine
I
that
know where you're
it,
going.
if you know where I'm going with this,
I know where you're
that it may be very difficult to want to get involved in a significant relationship again.
Yes. So truth be told, I didn't want to ever, from the words of Andre 3000, ever get married again. Uh,
Hmm.
I didn't want, why we have to have paperwork, girl? We don't need to, we
We don't need
don't have
titles.
to have
We don't need to.
paperwork.
Let me
I
doing all
love
that.
you. I love you. We don't need
Yeah,
all of
we
that,
just
girl.
love is all you need.
So when the fallout and the all of the cycles of grief, and then also the financial turmoil and just spiral that it puts you in, I was like, I ain't ever doing this again. They say never, but okay, I'll fix it. I ain't ever doing it again.
I didn't say
But
never.
I ain't say no. I said ain't ever. Yet and still, I mean, when a young lady that was so sweet, that was um family oriented, that was for me that I could, when I first started even dating her, I was like, you don't need somebody like me. Like you need like
Mm.
somebody that's never been married. You need to start with, you know what I'm saying? She was like, nah, but I ain't scared of that. I ain't scared of I was like,
But
for
you like
real.
I am. I'm scared of that.
I am, because I
Hmm.
know the baggage that I have. I was like, you don't
Mm.
need anybody with any baggage like this, and having two children as well
Hmm.
to deal with custody and
Hmm.
all these things on how to be. It was a lot, and
Hmm.
she was like, I ain't scared of that. I just want to
Hmm.
be with you. I want to, whatever. And so it was hard for me, and I almost sabotaged it so many times.
Hmm.
But it was hard for me to accept that, because I was still on my journey of healing.
Hmm.
But someone that still would just give me the grace to say I still
Hmm.
love you.
Hmm.
And that's how I got back into this thing. Into this. So I'm
Hmm.
married to the beautiful Latrice Van Zant Baker. Yet and still, it's something I'm trying to work out daily on how to be the husband for her, how to be,
Hmm.
um, and also giving myself grace, her grace, and
Hmm.
the whole situation grace.
Yeah.
It's dynamic, it's changing every day. Yet and still, here we are. But I definitely was one of those ones that was um, never ever going to do it again.
Hmm.
No reason to put these houses in the same names. I mean,
Hmm.
get these houses together. No, no, no. I don't want to get anything
Hmm.
linked up together, but all this paperwork, I didn't want any of that. And then also, I could, if I never got married again, I could just detach myself.
Yeah, you can
And
leave.
not
I can
have to
leave
go.
freely. I don't have to.
Yes, I could
Yeah.
go leave freely, but also detach my heart. I didn't have to put all of that in. I didn't have to do all of that work. I didn't have
Invest.
to invest all of that. And
Mhm.
then what that presented, I had to do the work and still doing the work.
I mean, and that honestly is the conversation about, am I even ready to date, right? Because what I'm hearing is, like you said, that dust is still from the grave
Yeah,
is still on me. So
yeah.
I'm still wounded.
Mhm.
It makes me feel like I'm carrying a lot of baggage. A lot of people will say I'm too much. Why would you
Yeah.
even want to deal with all? Do you even know what
That's
you're getting into?
yes. And so and I the baggage that I had was too much. Yet and still, what I had to offer was still, I was
Mhm.
still a godly man, still. So I don't want to play her like, like, oh dang, you took that. Oh, rascal,
Raggedy.
that raggedy rascal. That ain't no. I'm not putting myself down to that
Mhm.
level. Yet and still, that baggage with dealing with someone
Yeah.
with divorce, there's things that just come with that. There's triggers
Mhm.
that are there. There's when I see a situation, a scenario that reminds me of
Mhm.
something that it's scary and it might have triggered me, and I have to say, you know what? Let me get up off my butt and say sorry. Let me
Mhm.
apologize because
Mhm.
the triggers are there.
Yeah.
Um, Yet and still, for someone to love you and you love them again, it's beautiful. It's poetic.
I definitely feel like people don't recognize divorce as a form of trauma. That
Yeah,
divorce experience can be traumatic for people. Like
yeah,
sometimes it's a nasty process
yeah.
between divorce and custody. It can get real ugly. And so, yeah, there are things that are said, there are things that are done. And it does make you very hyper vigilant and you're very attentive to things like, is that a flag? Is that a warning sign?
Right, yeah.
I didn't pay attention the first time. I need to be paying attention this
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I want to make sure, I want to honestly present myself. I don't want any
yeah,
confusion about what all you got to deal with because I don't want you coming back later and saying I didn't tell you
yeah.
something. And
And
um,
that fear of failing again, I
mhm,
mean, that fear of failure again, that fear um of letting yourself down, because a
mhm,
lot of relationships are, I mean, we lost a lot of friends that we had, mutual friends. A lot of
mhm,
those relationships faltered and things like that. So going through that again, that's
mhm,
scary. And then the dynamics that COVID kind of played, where we had to see each other all day,
mhm.
every day, and then having to reconcile those two personalities every day, all day. It's
In
not,
this space with no
in this
escape.
space, and I'm still breathing. She just be like, "Was you still breathing, player?" So,
You're breathing awfully loud today.
now that's gonna be me, awfully loud anyway. Yet and still, she just, and so those dynamics that are at play there. Uh,
Mhm.
it's again, I keep saying this a lot, but we also have to give ourselves a grace through the whole situation.
What do you think helped you? Because fear is uh,
Yeah,
terrifying and it is immobilizing. And we can talk, or you said, I tried to sabotage this thing multiple times.
yeah,
We can talk ourselves out of things and we can, second guess so much because now I kind of question my judgment and my
yeah.
ability to be able to make good decisions. What allowed you to be able to push past those fears and allow you to address your wounds and move forward in this marriage?
For me, it's being analytical of my role and my part.
Mm,
Especially when I say, after a while, you start to see that this trigger right here, if I keep getting triggered by something, it's not the other person's fault. It's me.
mm,
So when
mm,
I started, when we say peep game, I started peeping game on my own self, saying like, "Hey man, you are really sabotaging. You're trying to." something good that comes, does that
Mm.
stem from something that's back? And it's also good to talk to somebody, talk it out as well. But really knowing yourself, really knowing and being responsible for your own role. I um, see this situation, and brother, this is your fault.
Mm.
Then take accountability for it, and
Mhm.
then you fix it and do
Mhm.
right. This is just, and then it won't happen again. If it you're less likely to go back to that to let that trigger affect you or whatever it was.
Mhm.
You have to really as far as it be you, be able to know yourself
Yeah.
and to regulate uh your behavior, your own
Mm.
behavior.
Yeah. First, know thyself, right? That is the
Oh man,
rule
first
to any relationship.
that's really what set me free from fear, is really like, this is fear stemming from that. This is
Mm.
nothing. There is nothing that the other person has shown
Mm.
um, with disloyalty or anything like that. This is just your fear that is triggered by something else, and you have to really wrestle with that, Adrian. And once you see that in the mirror, and like, yep, you got to do it.
I got to deal with me. I have to. We started this by saying, what were your expectations going in that first marriage? How were your expectations different this time around? Now that you had some experience, you had gone
Yeah,
through. What were your expectations of you, and what were your expectations of your partner?
yeah. The expectations of me was really of growth.
Mm.
You know, I always wanted um, a partner. I always say, I'm Martin now. I need me a Coretta, and she just be rolling her eyes. But the expectations of partnership for me are essential um, in the way in which that plays out in everything that we do. Now, of course, we're going to have our own individuality and things like that. But I don't want to fight against my spouse. I don't want to. It's a both and. It's not an either or. It's not me or the highway. It's what we gonna do. How we gonna fix this together? How we so. My expectations for me is my role in the partnership on how I was going to behave in this partnership, what I'm going to do. Uh, I'm going to try to be the mighty man of valor. Going to try to be the man of God. I'm going to try to
Mhm.
regulate my temper. I'm going to make sure that she lives in a house that is a safe house, that is that is not toxic, that is an atmosphere for her to be able to pursue whatever she wants to be who she wants to do what she wants to do. In the same way for me. So I guess it goes back to the golden rule where I really wanted to treat someone the way I wanted to be treated.
And I think that that's that piece that we learn after we've figured out how it doesn't work.
Yes. Yeah.
Is like, hey, I probably need to over communicate instead of under communicate.
Absolutely.
I need to learn how to forgive and let go and not hold grudges,
Yeah.
and create this safe space so you don't have to worry about something being thrown back in your face that you shared with me in vulnerability.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yeah. But
yeah.
that's still that those type of things still guarding your heart from ever
Mm-hmm.
being um that used against you. Those are
Mm-hmm.
things that have to be broken down piece by piece over time. It's not like so yeah, there's things that I might have told someone else in confidence I might go to the grave with now because
Mm-hmm.
it's when it's used against you, that trauma that's
Mm.
built around that, and still trying to break those things down. So just also um knowing your trauma, uh
Yeah.
being able to recognize how your behavior will not work,
Mm.
will not help the situation, or how your behavior has all the power to help the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think like you talk about that growth, and here's my podcast plug for therapy. I think that's important for us to be able to recognize when I need to learn some different skills.
Yeah.
Because often when we come through a trauma, we tend to be avoidant, right? Because who wants to exist in pain? Nobody likes pain. So we're going to do our very best to remove ourselves, push this
Mhm.
pain away, as far as protect myself, put these walls
Yes.
up,
Mhm.
not have to deal with this, which actually reinforces the trauma.
Absolutely.
So if I
It,
don't deal with these things,
it's
like you
going
said,
to
they're going to keep the dust coming back.
Yes, and that pressure busts pipes, and then when that
Mhm.
pipe busts, it's not good for anyone. And so, regulating that, I mean, it's helpful to your spiritual, your mental, and your physical.
Yeah, yeah. And being able to understand like my fears, because I think that's because we 30,000 thoughts a day. And so if 25,000 of them are fear-based,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how am I going to really be able to move forward? Because again, every time you do something that reminds me of an experience I had previously, now I'm responding to you out of that experience and not
yeah.
being present here in the moment. And so I have to learn some ways to now be able to recognize when there's an actual threat versus when there's
Absolutely.
a perceived threat.
And I would be remiss if I didn't lift the fact that your support system is
Mm,
essential. Your
mm,
support system during that time. So for fear for me, it was my support system like, hey, chill out. Hey, it's
mm,
going to be all right. Those type of things. My family is awesome. I've
mm,
got great parents, and just the support system around me, yet and still also that brotherly support system that we need.
mm,
Um, Talking to some of my frat brothers, they,
mm,
just having that conversation like, hey, I've been through this, I've been through that,
mhm,
and knowing that you're not unique in your pain,
mhm.
it kind of frees you a bit.
It
Not to
does.
say that that's, but it frees you a bit. But knowing that you have a support system that can talk it out,
Mhm.
it is so essential. Just go through this alone. Um, Go with God as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I don't see how people, so I know it's a given for me, for me to not even have to lift up, the assembly of the saints. The church that was being around folks that were praying for you, loving on you, and saying it's all right and giving you the grace that you couldn't
mhm,
give yourself.
mhm.
Essential.
And I think that you speak about you keep saying it's not a either or, it's a both and, the diunital theology
Uh-huh.
of like we can do multiple things.
Yes,
So you can go see a therapist and have a spiritual home that you're going to and pray to God, have
absolutely.
have congregants that are with you, especially if you're in a healthy church, because I
Jesus
recognize
and
that not, yeah, Jesus and therapy all the time.
therapy. It's both and.
Both and right. My friends, my family, because and it speaks to the healthiness of the
Absolutely.
different resources that we have. Because if I'm in a healthy church, they're gonna say, "Hey, God still loves you."
Absolutely. Uh,
Um,
God still loves you, and
God
we do
still loves
too.
you, and
And
we do
yet,
too.
yeah.
Absolutely. And you going through a divorce doesn't mean that you are a failure in the eyes of God.
Right.
This relationship didn't work
Mhm.
because maybe we didn't have the right tools, maybe we
Absolutely.
weren't the right fit.
Mhm.
Maybe we were still growing and developing, and as we were doing that, we grew apart. All of these things that are factors. And so even though this marriage ended, that doesn't mean that in the eyes of God, like, oh well, done with you. You a
Yeah,
failed project.
yes.
Over with. Let me
And,
not
s-
write like
and so it's essential to have also a clinical therapist paired with
yes.
your paired
Come on.
with uh
Absolutely. Both
your
and.
relationship with Christ. It's
Both
both and
and.
because that
Yeah.
relationship is also given by Christ as well. So don't
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so
Yeah. They are
don't put it
together.
they're together. That
Absolutely.
just like the gifts of music and the gifts of art we talked
Yes.
about earlier.
Right.
Some people have those gifts. You said
Yeah.
from an early age you were over there, healing folks and talking to whatever. So all of those things are essential.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it releases that shame, like you talked about the pipe bursting from pressure.
Yeah,
If I release that and I'm not letting shame bind me, because
yeah,
shame will bind you.
yes,
Secrecy is a place where shame is partying like a rock star.
right.
Um,
That's
so
why that
when you
isolation piece is, yeah, it's essential.
absolutely, absolutely. So when you're over here struggling and then and again, and them 30,000 thoughts real loud
Yes,
about all of the ways that you have screwed up in your life,
yeah,
right? So let me free myself from that bondage of my mind, get out here and talk to people to remind me that I'm still worthy,
yeah.
that there is life after the divorce dust. And even though the dust might still be
It's a
residue, little
it's a little
residue
loose.
around,
It's a
look,
little
right?
loose. It's a little
Right.
loose.
But I don't have to get back in the grave.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any books or podcasts or resources or anything that you want to share that you think may be helpful for people? You've given a lot of great information.
I mean, really, there's there's a lot of Facebook posts that I've seen, that have been good. This Facebook church has been good. Facebook therapy has been good. And it's not one particular, but yeah, just make sure you're always in tune to what God is trying to speak to you in this season. Especially when it comes to while you're in your grief. Every time I was at the end of my rope, wanting to sit at the crib, do nothing, stay in bed just all day long, and not want to engage with the world. Every time there was a still small voice that was tugging me. Hey, you can't stay there. You got to get out of this grave. You can't do so. I would say just really my relationship with the Lord was essential for me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this was for everyone, yet it's still how everyone's going to navigate. Yet and still, that's really what was so essential.
Yeah.
So essential for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's important for people to hear that, because sometimes we let grief separate us from the love of God, because we're dealing with those cycles, and there's all of those levels of pain and trauma that we're navigating through. And sometimes that can be a separation, and I may need to hear that's when you may actually need to, instead of avoiding and withdrawing from, you may need to seek out.
Yes, and a platform like this is so
Yeah.
essential. It's a lot of times there was not a place for me to hear on the internets someone to deal with the
The
situation
interwebs.
on the interwebs. So it was not a space. So that's why it's so essential and vital that we no matter where you are, the church, the unchurched, no matter, we all deal with these relationship situations. So it's
Absolutely.
important for us to have a space like this.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Reverend Adrian Baker, for being vulnerable, being present in your experience, sharing a word that somebody needed to hear, and they needed to hear from a man, because sometimes men aren't given the same space to be able to process and talk through. And so as we break down these perspectives that being a man means you have to hold stuff in and carry it on your own, that no, share the load, many hands make light work. Right, so we can release these things and recognize that somebody else is going through this experience. I don't have to be in this by myself. So I want to thank you for using your gifts, your talents on this platform with us this evening.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so welcome. So we have our October episodes gearing up. Tuesday, October the 4th is going to be a time change, 8:30, because my guest is in California. And so we are going to be rocking more on the Pacific time schedule. So we're going to be pushing that show back to 8:30. My Body Feels Like It's Failing Me, Women in Fertility Challenges with Dr. Woyetta. Tuesday, October 11th, 7:30 p.m. because y'all love these relationship conversations. Save yourself, Black man, overcoming the toxicity of past relationships. And we're going to be also talking in this month a little between men and women. So look forward to a dialogue between men and women, just talking about navigating dating and relationships and hurt and pain in healthy ways instead of attacking each other. So thank you to everyone that tuned in. Make sure you share this with someone who may need to hear this, because they may be going through something and think they're by themselves. And Reverend Adrian Baker came to tell you that you're not alone, and that there is, even though there's still a little dust, there is also some healing on the other side of divorce. Everyone take care and be well.
Many blessings. God bless.
Good night.